So as we tap into this interview with Fred today, I want you to keep in mind a few different things. Fred has been a psychotherapist for over 25 years, and he's been business consulting and business coaching for the exact same amount of time. On top of that, growing up, Fred and those around him really thought that he was going to be an attorney. So to see everything that he's doing now, to see the impact that he's been able to have, to see the industry that he's in, it's definitely a change of pace, but it's definitely something that was needed along the way. Fred will be the first to tell you there has been a lot that's gone right and wrong in his life. But it's not about the right and the wrong. It's really about what you do with it and how you continue to move forward despite everything thrown your way. Fred will also be the first to tell you about a life-changing moment that happened in his life as a marriage counselor and how that completely flip-turned everything that he was doing, but how he was able to rebound from that and still be able to tell the story today. One question I want you to think about before we start this episode. Do you know the one guaranteed time that a relationship is over? It's no coming back from it. It's no saving from it. I'll let Fred do the explaining on that one. Without further ado, enjoy episode 186, Positive Selfishness. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner. Look, y'all know my excitement rings true with every single episode, but I have to say, man, Fred has been quite the guest already, and we haven't even gotten into a conversation. But just the fact that, he took a very proactive approach. He reached out to me, sent me over some things. He even listened to the podcast, gave me some amazing feedback that even some of my audience have resonated with and agreed with just the same. And it was just something that, it made my day. It made the ending of my weekend. And I'm really just excited to sit down. I think he shares that same excitement, but very, very, very fortunate enough to be able just to pick his brain today to take advantage of some of the resources that he has and just the knowledge and the expertise. And I'm pretty sure that after hearing him speak, after hearing him answer some things, speak about his story and his journey, a lot of y'all are going to want to tap in and take advantage of him just the same. So before we get into all things, before I let him give you guys the rundown from top to bottom, Fred, how you doing today? How's everything on your end?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be talking to you.
Good. Absolutely. So we're definitely excited to have you. Like I said, thank you for the time. Thank you for the enthusiasm. Thank you for really just coming on here and making my job 100 times easier. So I know we're going to have people from all over tapping in. I know we're going to have people from my side on the East Coast here. I know we're going to have people from your side on the West Coast. I know we're going to have some people in between. There's some newcomers, everything like that. So to bring everybody up to speed, put everybody on the same page, can you just do two things for me? Can you, one, just tell us actually a little bit about yourself, and then two, just tell us what brings you on the Down to Business podcast today?
I've been a licensed psychotherapist for over 25 years. And I specialize in fixing, revitalizing, and saving relationships. I've also, for the same amount of time, had a second practice doing business consulting.
So now, at what point did you, I guess I would say, what originally piqued your interest? Because I feel like, while these aren't really two opposite sides of a spectrum, to have this intersectionality with them, it's very interesting. It's not something that is very common within that space. So was there a particular problem? Was there something that was it something things going on in your life, or people kind of reaching out to you? What was really your start? What was really your journey into getting into practicing what you practice and then tying that in with business coaching?
Well, the business coaching part had to do with when I was a new therapist. I had this really false belief that if I just, with all the schooling I had and all the postgraduate work I did, that people come flocking to my door. And of course, nobody did. I knew nothing about marketing. So I hit up everybody that I knew that was in sales and marketing, and to teach me how to be able to create a practice and market a practice. And I got so good at learning how to do that I started teaching others. Not just in private practice, but all kinds of businesses.
In general. Okay. So would you say growing up, that was always a passion of yours in some sort? Like you knew you wanted to get into that field. That's really always something of yours that was just top of mind. And did you kind of, okay, so I see you kind of shaking your head. So at what point did you realize that, at what point did you kind of pivot, I guess, in a sense? At what point did you really kind of take what you were doing or what you were currently involved in and kind of switch over to getting into things and practicing on your own end?
Mr. Miyagi. I'll explain that. I always grew up and thinking I'd be an attorney, and everybody else did too. And I was 16 years old. I had a life coach who was like my Mr. Miyagi from like Karate Kid, the original Karate Kid. But instead of teaching me martial arts, he taught me about life and about personal growth. And that was that was my inspiration to be like him and help others the way that he helped me.
Now, I always love the approach of just wanting to pay it forward in a sense, just wanting to take what you have, take what was given to you, take what you've learned, what you studied, even what you've gone through in a sense, and be able to help others, whether it be get out of a certain type of rut or situation, whether it just be to avoid maybe certain situations or just to, stay on the up and up, stay on the track that they're on and continue to have success. But with that, it can be easier said than done. There can be a lot of trials and tribulations. There can be obstacles that deter things. There can just be people that are sometimes stuck in their own ways, stuck in their own beliefs, everything of the sort. So, have you along this journey encountered adversity, encountered maybe people who didn't necessarily agree with what you were putting out there, who necessarily may have just found things in their own way? And I'm also say that too from a perspective of I think about the entrepreneurial journey. And I think about how sometimes just the painstaking amount of dedication that can come with that. I think about how it can be long nights, early mornings. It can be sleepless nights in a sense. It can be just, you're depleting yourself in all aspects, whether it be, financially, whether it be spiritually, mentally, physically, everything like that. At some point, you're really giving everything that you have. And I feel like a lot of times people are so just gung ho or so focused on that journey that they kind of shut out the entire world of everything else. Even me sometimes, like, I haven't necessarily, burned bridges in a sense, but I haven't necessarily been sometimes the best friend, the best family member because of just the entrepreneurial world and me just being so locked in. So for people out there who sometimes just feel like they want to focus so much on what they have going on, so much on the business, so much on the journey, so much on making that money, and they'll kind of just push things to the wayside. How do you feel about that? Like, what do you say to that? What do you say about, just really finding that balance and being able to have these relationships, these friendships, but also still focus on your craft and your service just the same?
Great question. Is having a clarity of purpose. It's knowing how you want to be as a romantic partner, as a parent, and making sure you're in integrity with yourself. See, a lot of people think that relationship is 50-50. It's not. People use that to justify a lot of bad behavior. I'll treat you good if you treat me bad. I'll treat you bad if you treat me bad. So relationship is a 100% proposition that you want to be how you want to be based on meeting your goals and standards as a partner. It's not based on what your partner says or does. If there's things you're not happy with, you want to address it, but that doesn't change how you are.
I love that you said that because I'm very much for the people who know me, they know that when it comes to the term of like matching energy, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of, like you said, just because somebody does something good to you or the contrary, that you return that same aspect. I think that through and through, you should just remain who you are, remain Fred, remain Tamar, remain true to you, because at the end of the day, that's all you can really worry about. You can't really help that somebody wanted to, somebody maybe was having a bad day and maybe took that out on you. You can't help that, somebody was having a great day and they paid it forward or they did something that was a blessing unto you. As long as I feel like as long as you stay, you be you. You take the good with the good, you take the bad with the bad. I feel like you have to appreciate everything as it comes. But something that as I was kind of going through your bio and just everything that you kind of speak about that was very interesting to me was the phrase positive selfishness. And I love that just because like a lot of times I will tell myself like you had to be selfish, but then you hear the word selfish and it brings about a negative connotation and people just automatically think like, you're just disregarding everything else. But you throw that P word in front of it, that positive, now all of a sudden it kind of sounds a little, you can ease into it a little bit more. So can we just take a deeper dive into that positive selfishness
Yeah, I would love to.
when coining that term, when getting into that, what is it? Why is it important? And why should people not feel ashamed of it?
So let me give you the contrast. Negative selfishness is doing for yourself at the cost of others. Positive selfishness is doing for yourself, not at the cost of others. So I was raised to put myself last. So this is something I had to learn. So when anybody wanted or needed anything from me, I would just jump in and do it, not thinking how it would affect me. And so now when something's asked of me, it's something I teach my clients. I teach them how to do positive, friendly, negotiated yeses. In other words, when I'm asked to something, first I'll think through in relationship to what they're asking for, what's going to work for me, and then I think through what's going to work for them, And I offer possibilities I think will work equally well for both of us. And then when there's cases where I can't come up with something I think will work equally well for both of us, another skill I teach my clients, I do myself, is called the positive reframe. That I'm saying yes to the intention of what they're asking, but no to the specifics. I'll give you an example. So sometime back, actually a couple years ago on July 3rd, my wife said, my new really good friend is having a 4th of July party tomorrow, and she invited us, so I'd like us to go. Would you go? I knew instantly I didn't want to go because her friend lives in a beach town. We live in a beach town. Normally, her friend is like a 4-hour round trip away. The worst traffic year where we live is on 4th of July because people are coming in from everywhere to go to the beach. We don't even leave the house after 9 o'clock in the morning because we'll be locked in with traffic. So I thought we were going to be on the road for 8 hours. So I said, I'd love to meet your friend. That was a positive intention, I imagine. And I said, anytime you want to set up a time that works for both of us, and perfectly because your friend's retired, that she's coming to our area, I would love to meet her. But tomorrow, I had a really full day today, and I've got a really full day on July 5th. And I figure I'll be on the road for 8 hours because of 4th of July traffic. So I don't want to do that. And if you want to go, feel free to go. And 10 minutes later, she said, I thought about it. You're right. I don't want to be on the road for 8 hours. So she didn't go either.
I like that. But
and then several months later, her friend came to our area. We took her out to lunch, and now I had like a 6-minute commute instead of an 8-hour commute to meet her.
Much better, much more reasonable, I think, and enjoyable. You get some food in there too, so you can't beat that. But a lot of what I'm hearing in that is communication,
Right.
But it's also listening, it's compromise, it's understanding, it's perspective too. Because there was a point in my life where I really had to realize the difference between listening to respond versus listening to truly understand. Oftentimes, I found myself just listening enough that I could generate a response, whatever that response may be: positive, defensive, negative, facetious, enthusiastic, anything like that. But I started to realize that I was tuning out certain things. I was tuning out important things. I wasn't even really respecting that person's boundaries enough to allow them to speak, to communicate, to do everything like that. When I began to start listening to understand, my conversation has changed. The things changed. It was less about misunderstanding. It was less about one person wanting to be right versus wrong versus prove a point. It was about that perspective. It was about, hey, and I often tell people that I love perspective so much because while I cannot necessarily agree with what you're saying, or I wouldn't do it myself, I can still respect that. I can still say that I invalidate it, that your feelings are very much valid, whether they relate to me or resonate with me or not. They're still there, because it would be selfish of me to say that I don't agree with that. That's it. And just, my way or the highway. And that was my thinking for quite some time. And it really took a lot of just transformation on my end, having conversations, really speaking to people, and also realizing, the same respect or the same decency that I want, I definitely have to reciprocate that in a sense. And it's not even more so about matching the energy, but it's just about giving somebody that respect too. So I love that. And I love how intentional you are with your wording, with your understanding, with how you communicate. So I could imagine that throughout your journey.
Wait,
Yeah,
can I speak to something you said?
absolutely.
Because you talked about compromise.
Yeah.
I don't teach compromise in relationship.
Hmm.
So what I teach people to do instead is what I call mutually satisfying agreements.
Okay.
So most of us are raised to believe that when you love somebody, you should make sacrifices for them. And this is a noble idea. When it comes to raising children, and it comes to caring for pets, making sacrifices works. When it comes to a romantic relationship, making sacrifices doesn't work. It tends to break down. Because when people make sacrifices in their mind, whether they do or not, but they feel like they made sacrifices, they wind up feeling resentful, and resentment is a relationship killer. And most people in a relationship think of the word compromise as just another word for sacrifice. So with mutually satisfying agreements, the way I teach people to think it through is to look for solutions that work equally well for both people. Because when you're doing that, my clients become masters at doing that, then there's no compromise and no sacrifice and no resentment and no residuals.
I like that. I like that a lot. It sounds like, if I didn't know any better, it sounds like you're quite the expert, if I had to say so myself.
Thank
But
you.
no, I think, that's another reason why I love my thinking now about perspective. It sometimes it just takes hearing something, or the wording of something, or how you put something out there as to how it's understood or how it's received by another party. So with specifically relationships, but more defining to romantic relationships now. Now, I could understand that you've probably met a host of people at different stages in these journeys. Some people who, you know, are kind of just starting to deal with maybe some tension, or just starting to deal with maybe some issues or disagreements or anything. You might have met some people who it's kind of been continuing for a while, and things are kind of been rocky and everything like that. Now, for what you do, I understand that you're probably not niche specific. Being that you work with entrepreneurs and business owners, you've probably worked across a host of different industries and different fields and everything like that. How do you, time and time again, continuously tie in your principles and your teachings and your practices to people who are not familiar with it? Because as someone who, I've never necessarily saw a counselor, a therapist, a business coach, a consultant, anything like that. And it's not to say that I haven't done that because I feel as though I don't need it, or I feel as though I'm above it, or I just feel as though, I'm not necessarily there. Sometimes it's just, I really couldn't even give you a specific reason as to why I have not, and I'm open to it. I'm a big don't knock it till you try it type of person. But I also know that everybody doesn't receive everything well, especially when they're being told that something that they have to do maybe has to change, or we need to adjust some things, or we need to become mutually satisfied. It's not just about you per se. How do you, time and time again, continuously tie in your practices, your teachings, your morals, everything like that, to people who are not familiar with it?
Partly because of my life experience, that I had a turning point in my life, that years ago, one day I came home from a meeting and something was really off. And I looked around and all of the art on the walls was gone. And I knew that we had been broken into. And so I checked, my wife wasn't home, which I was really grateful. So she wasn't in danger. I thought she'd be heartbroken because it was the art that her mother did, who died. And we really loved her mom. And that was her way of honoring her. And then I found the note. And the note said, "I loved you dearly. I can't stay with you. Here's the number of my attorney." And I felt devastated. And I felt ashamed. And I felt humiliated. How could I, as a respected marriage counselor, not even fix and save my own marriage? And that caused me to do a really deep search, because I had been unhappy. I didn't realize how unhappy she was. We had gone to 2 respected marriage counselors, each time, which made things far worse. And I realized that I and all the other marriage counselors I knew weren't trained to save and fix relationships. That what we were trained to do didn't and doesn't work. So that put me on a lifelong search through today of what does work to fix and revitalize and save a relationship and keep a family together. And that's what I teach my clients.
And it's oftentimes in moments like that we, like you say, you have to go on a journey, in a sense, on self-realization, self-reflection, on really, you can, as you said, you recognize that there were some parts of you that were not happy, that you would have changed, that you would have adjusted, you would have altered. But it wasn't until you really started to dig a bit deeper that you realize really the severity of it. And you realize that it wasn't just affecting you, it was affecting your partner just the same. And often it kind of also makes me think about people thinking that things are too late sometimes, or that there's no saving or no fixing or no turning back or no getting out of this. And I think that that can be something that's subjective. You never really know until you go on that introspective journey, until you really figure things out, until you really sit down and tap in. So for those people out there who may adopt that mindset, may feel as though, look, there's no point in fixing this. We're too far deep in. It's a lot of stress back and forth. It's no really solving this problem. It's not really happening. What would you say to encourage them to keep an open mind and to consider that it's not too late, that things can be fixed, that things can be changed?
Great question. I think that most relationships that end are an unnecessary tragedy, especially when they have children together. If they had gotten the right kind of help and acted on that help, they could be actually really happy together. Also, people ask me the question that sometimes they'll contact me and say, well, I really believe that you could help me, or you could have helped me, but I think that I waited too long.
Hmm.
I think my relationship is over. My partner says they're breaking up, or we're already living separately, or they've already filed divorce papers.
Mhm.
Because I work with a lot of unmarried people too. Am I just being a fool to even try? And my answer, there's one time when a relationship is definitely, absolutely guaranteed over. And that's when the person that wants to save the relationship gives up.
Hmm.
Because at that point, there's no advocate for the relationship.
Right.
I'm really realistic, and I've had people contact me with such dire situations that I think even my help, they're not going to be able to save it.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've been smart enough not to tell them my opinion, and they usually take what I've taught them, turn things around, and save the relationship and made it work. If I can't know for sure, I don't think anybody else can either.
Right.
But you know, if the person wants to save it, gives up, they're the ones that ended it, not their partner. I also want to tell you that there's a happy ending or happy continuation of my story, that I've been with my current wife for 28 years.
Yes.
And everything I teach my clients, that I do in my own relationship. I'm a big believer in practicing what I teach.
Yes.
I'm a big believer in the Gandhi approach to everything.
Okay.
I don't know if you know, do you know the Gandhi sugar story?
I do not.
Mahatma Gandhi, when he was, before he was like world famous,
Mhm.
he was famous in his own country. He used to have public audiences,
Mhm.
and people would use him like as a life coach. And this woman came to him and she said, Gandhi, here's my son. He really respects you, and he eats sugar and he acts crazy on sugar. So please tell him to stop eating sugar, and he will. Here he is. And she put your son in front of her.
Mhm.
And he said, I'm happy to do that. Come back in 3 days with your son, and I'll tell him. And then they were dismissed. And his assistant was just beyond upset,
Mhm.
whispered in Gandhi's ear and said, this poor woman's like, they're really poor. They're gonna be on the street for 3 days,
Mhm.
probably nothing to eat.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't you just tell them now? Gandhi looked at his assistant, smiled, and he said, it'll take me 3 days to get off his sugar. One of his core principles as a leader, as a teacher, as a husband, as a parent,
Mhm.
was to live what he taught. And that's what I try to do in my life.
And I'm a firm believer in practicing what you preach, because it shows the real, as you said, being realistic, and it's not just something that you're pulling from a book or a term that you coined or a ideal or so. It's no, I'm telling you this because this is a real life example of me doing it, me implementing it, me experiencing it, me going through it. And I think it ties it in just that much more. It's one thing to hear a story from maybe a what if perspective, or here's what I would do if this happened, or so and so. I'm a big believer in not speaking on things that you haven't been in, because you never really know. We can all say what we would do in a certain situation, or what we would do if this happened, or but to me, it's what you think you would do, or what you think you would do based off the mindset that you're in now. But when that situation is looking you dead in the face, when you're in it to win it, you never know. A different mode could kick in, fight or flight could kick in. emotions could truly kick in and take over. You could speak from anger, speak from hurt, from negative emotions, from selfishness. You never really know until it's really facing you, until y'all are staring each other dead in the eyes. So I love that too, because it also promotes a sense of trust and authenticity with you and whom you're working with as well, and whom you're speaking with, and whom you're in other relationships with. You know, they know that you're, while you may be a guru and an expert, you're not necessarily trying to sell people anything. You're not necessarily trying to say, hey, look, they doctors say or research shows or studies show or anything. No, Fred is speaking from Fred's perspective, because this is what Fred is going through, and this is what worked for me and what worked for him. Now, I'm not telling you to do it. You then tailor it towards said person, said relationship, said experience, and everything like that. But I love that, because it's one thing to talk to someone who has never been in your shoes but can offer great advice. But it's another thing to talk to somebody who's been there, done that, and then still gives that great advice on top of that. It just makes you feel like, we're almost one and the same in a sense. So this question made my eyes go wide when I read it. What is the single most important thing that relationships need to work? I was very intrigued by that, because I feel like, or that the single most important thing that everyone in a relationship needs to really make it work. I was intrigued by that because I almost felt like, I watch Family Feud a lot. And I almost felt like it was one of those things that, like, if you ask somebody, maybe during like the fast money round, or maybe when they have the triple points or anything like that, you might get some crazy answers. You might go some crazy different ways and have people doing this and we doing that. So, Fred, tell me, what is the single most important thing that everyone in a relationship needs to really make it work?
The answer is to never, ever, ever, ever communicate when you're in negative emotion. No matter how good our communication skills are, when we're in negative emotion, they go out the window. And whatever you say, you can't take back. Your partner's not going to have amnesia for it. You're not going to forget it. So almost all of the biggest problems in a relationship happen. People speak when they're in negative emotion.
Mm.
People have the illusion that, gee, if I just get it off my chest, I'll feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they might, but then now they made things worse with and for their partner.
Right. As I think about myself, someone who at one point I was almost being considered to be put in like anger management or therapy of some sort. I was a very short fuse at times, and it wasn't even necessarily relationships. It could have just been situations that just, something might have perturbed me, rubbed me the wrong way, anything of the sort. How do you explain to people, or how do you inform people about the ways to not speak when you're seeing red, or when you're in that negative state of mind? Because I feel like a lot of times, as we said, I think it goes back to that thing of when you're upset, when you disagree, when you're angry, whatever the case may be, you only listen for what you want to hear. You only interpret for how you want to hear it, or for how you're taking it, your perspective. How do you get people to not how do you get people to pretty much not act in that state of mind? Because I feel like that's hard. I feel like that, especially within a relationship, it can become a thing of where you just want to prove your point, or you just want to get something off, or you just want to say something, or you just want to be heard or to be understood. How do you get people to refrain from speaking when they're not in the right state of mind?
Part of the answer is before. In other words, that everybody has patterns, and if you're conscious of tracking your partner's patterns, because we're aware of them unconsciously, then when they do their pattern, you're not going to get triggered because they're just being who they are. So that's one element. Another element is to be aware of the early warning signs. That the first conscious awareness of beginning, keywords beginning to go into negative emotion, will either be a sensation in a specific part of our body and or a change in body temperature. If we look for it, you'll know what it is for you. At the earliest warning sign of getting that sensation, you want to do what's called a pattern interruption. In other words, you want to give a believable reason why you have to break contact. the one that works in all situations. Be right back. I have to go to the bathroom. Nobody's tell you don't have to go. And I teach clients what to do, so that they can, when they're by themselves, release their negative emotion. So that's part of the answer.
Because I like that ending too, because I feel like there still needs to be a release of some sort.
Yeah.
I think it's important to tailor how you do that release. And that's what I wish I would have been able to do just a bit better. Recognizing that, because then it became a point for me where I just began to hold things in, to bottle up, to not really want to talk, to not really communicate. And we all know that with anything, with enough pressure, eventually it'll burst. And that burst sometimes could be inadvertent, unintentional. It could be on somebody who didn't even necessarily deserve it per se, because nobody really deserves it if you think.
No.
But a lot of times those lashing outs and those just you reach your wits end are for sometimes some of the smallest things. It's just like your button is just being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and it was that last one. It may have even been a slight tip, and then it just it comes to be a big thing. So for me, I also really had to recognize that the tailoring of the release part. And I feel like the release for me, it wasn't always in the healthiest of ways. It wasn't even always a release. Sometimes there were even some things where now, if I feel like if I talk to somebody or really sit down and really go through things, that it was just things that needed to be addressed. It was probably trauma there. It was my communication style. It was me not taking the time to think, to just gather myself. Because when your thoughts are just running a mile a minute and you just want to get everything off, and then you're in the midst of somebody else throwing things at you, that can be a very overwhelming situation.
Yes,
And
it can go badly really, really, really quickly.
Very
The
quickly.
distinction I make is that disagreements, misunderstandings are a normal and natural part of any relationship. You can teach people how to minimize those, but not to eliminate them.
Gotcha.
In contrast to that, fighting and arguing is always unnecessary and usually destructive. There's no such thing as fair fighting. Not in a relationship.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one a lot. So I have been able to check out your website and just the testimonials about what it is that you do, and the experience that you've been able to give unto others, the stories that they've shared, and just the transformations within those. What have you found to be most successful when getting out what it is that you do? Is this a lot of word of mouth? Is this a lot of other people are coming to you because they're experiencing things, and then they're referring or suggesting or maybe giving other people to you? Like, how do because I've even looked at, you've been able to build quite a subscriber list from your emails. That's amazing. As somebody who had an email list at one point, but kind of just tailored off and fell off to it. But I'm on so many different email lists, so it's so motivational to me. As someone who does what you do and have been doing it and doing it and doing it for so long, how is it that people find out about you? How is it that people come across you? How is it that people, because I'm way on the East Coast and we're tapping in now, but I could imagine that through and through, all the business owners, the entrepreneurs, the relationship, the people who you've been able to talk to, married, not single, dating, anything like that, I could imagine that they've kind of been scattered all across. So how is it that you're, where really does the marketing of what you do come into play?
Well, first of all, I work virtually, so I work everywhere, work with people all over the world to speak English, because I'm not fluent in anything else. And I get a lot of referrals. I get generations. I work with people, and then I work with their kids when they've grown up. I work with and also done child therapy too with them. And then I've been also worked with them as adults, and I've worked with some people's grandkids. So
that's extensive. I like that. That's
yeah. Yeah. So partly I've been, for doing this as long, I've helped like literally thousands of people to fix or save their relationships, that they've gotten the word out there and sent me like a lot of people.
Gotcha. I love that. That's amazing. But that also too, the reason why I asked that is also because it also goes to show the quality of who you are, of the type of work ethic that you possess, and of, like you said, just that realistic approach that you have. And like you said, because sometimes people can, one of my favorite sayings is, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Because I feel like, a lot of times that could make or break somebody's entire understanding or opinion about you.
Sure.
Whether you were having a bad day, whether you may have rubbed somebody the wrong way, said something maybe a little bit insensitive, joked, not smiled, not looked them in the eye, not had a friend. People, there are different cues for different people. And I even think about some of my experiences where I may have formulated an opinion or a view about somebody or someone coming in, and I may have had to have different interactions to really realize that wasn't it, or maybe it was just that time, or it was just that day, or it was just the circumstances that were going on. So I love that too, because people are not going to continue to work with you, one, but also continue to refer, want to send to others, want to continue to move that impact, move that needle, if they don't feel as though they can trust what you have going on.
Yeah, I'm known as somebody that shows people to get results. See, I figured out after my turning point, I figured out that everything I was trained on as a licensed therapist was based on the false premise that insight creates change. Insight doesn't create change. People understand why they've got the problem and still keep creating the problem. Change creates change.
Right.
So everything I do with people is very result oriented.
Okay.
What I do with people, I figure out there's a foundation of skills I need to teach people to give them the best possibility to have a thriving relationship.
Gotcha.
One of those is being able to stay connected and or to reconnect to love that brought them together in the first place. Another is to be able to deal with the negative and dwell on the positive. What that means in a relationship is usually toward the beginning of the relationship. From then on, people begin to create a generalized negative case against their partner. They keep looking for evidence to reinforce that case in their mind. And the bigger negative case they feel in their mind, the more upset they feel, more unhappy they feel, the more out of love they feel, the more they use that case to justify bad communication and bad behavior. So one of the keys help them to be able to take that negative case and replace it with a positive one. Another is to give them skills they both feel consistently listened to and understood, what you're talking about earlier. Some people feel listened to and understood, they tend to be more cooperative. People don't feel listened to and understood, they tend to withdraw, attack, or defend. Another we're talking about earlier, and there's a difference between hearing somebody and understanding them and them feeling heard and understood, two separate things.
Yeah.
Teach them how to do both. Another is to be, we talked about earlier, is to only communicate when you're in positive emotion. Another is to be able to talk to your partner in a way that they feel consistently loved, respected, and emotionally supported. Another is to be able to create, talked about earlier, mutually satisfying agreements. Another is what I call emotionally reconnecting communication. In other words, what happens almost from the beginning of a relationship is people have primarily fact-based communication, F-A-C-T. When you're living together, when you have kids together, when you have pets together, there's a certain amount of discussion of facts you need to have, but there's nothing about talking about facts that creates any kind of feeling of closeness or connection.
Gotcha. And
there's more, but
I was about to say, I know that's not it, but man, I'm smiling and I'm almost speechless in a sense, because it's just like, wow, it's really just opening my eyes up, because I'm taking what you're saying and I'm thinking of it from a romantic relationship perspective, but I'm also thinking about it just from some of the relationships that I have with other people in my life, whether it be colleagues, whether it be coworkers, whether it be people from school, people who I grew up with, played sports with, people who I've lived, I think about all of these different, just things that can be applied, and just things that can, like you said, change evokes change. Change creates change. It's about, it's not really just about inquiring about something or being curious about something. It's about that action, that taking that step to really do it. So, man, this is, I'm very excited to, and I don't do this often, but I'm very excited to play this back probably in its entirety. Not to say that I don't listen to the podcast, I don't replay my episodes, but obviously there are certain episodes that stand out to me for different reasons, because I want to take certain notes on things. I want to be able to apply things, reflect on things, put that out there like that. So, man, it's not, it was one thing to read the bio, to go through the website, to kind of, just be able to, just on my own time, just scroll, just see whatever, read everything. But it's another thing to be, I'm not going to say live and direct, I'll say virtual and direct, but it's another thing to really just hear it from the source and really hear it expounded upon and explained. Man, it's eye opening, but I love it because, it takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of doing, explaining, understanding, like you said, because you're not going to put something out there that is not personal to you, is not related to you. So I think that's why I take this even a little more to heart, because it's just like you are the living testimony. You are the living what you're saying, practicing what you're preaching, literally. So, um, man, I'm almost indebted. I feel like, because of just the resources that you've been able to give us, just the expertise that you have here, and just making yourself even vulnerable, because that's not easy either. It's not easy to admit where you messed up in certain situations, admit what could have went, what could have been, or what could have did this, but there's always that silver linings to things. And there's always, like you said, when that change really does come and it's finally evoked, what happens? 28 years now that you've been locked in, and that's amazing, and that's beautiful. Congratulations to that. But it goes to show everything that came along that journey, everything that was before that was during that'll be after that. So something that also too we are really big here on the podcast is like the futuristic outlook and what's kind of next. Because, and the reason why I love that is just because obviously the Down to Business podcast is going to be following you for the rest of your days now, but and all the audience and everything that we have. But I know there are people on here, whether they be in relationships, married, out of relationship, divorced, widowed, and everything like that. Essentially, you've spoken to more than one person here tonight. And I think you've evoked curiosity. You've evoked the want to change. You've evoked maybe even some questions, maybe even some personal experiences. Even for me, I'm thinking, like I said, I'm thinking back to some of the things that I was going through as a child and just growing up and losing a parent and not having the best relationships and just going about certain things in certain ways. So I love this just because people can now not only hear your story, follow you at this point in your journey, but also see what's to come, what's going. So as we think about, as we continue to move throughout this year, years after, is there anything that you're looking to get into? Is there anything that you're excited to do? And are you debuting anything? Are you looking forward to working with anybody in particular? Is there anything that we can kind of keep on our radars or keep our antennas up for as we continue to move forward with you?
There is. I decided to give away a really important stuff of what I give people. And so I created a 4-episode pop-up podcast on relationship mastery that your listeners can access for free by going to relationshipmagic.com. It's relationshipmagic.com. And that includes, we talked about how to not communicate in anger. I teach all the steps in those episodes of how to never again have another fight or argument, because there's like several steps involved. I teach them all in all the detail. I teach my clients. I teach people, all the skills in that pop-up series of how to make your partner feel consistently respected, listened to, and understood, and to make them feel loved and cared for, and teach them how to do the same thing with you. Let me see what else. I teach them how to communicate with kindness, so their partner is compelled to be cooperative. Because when you listen to most relationships, they sound like they're enemies, not that they're in a love relationship. Teach all the skills of being able to talk about earlier about getting out your anger with no consequences. I teach all the steps of how to do that. So those are just, some of the maybe 20 things I teach in those 4 episodes. So if you go to relationshipmagic.com, you'll get the link to be able to access that pop-up podcast.
I love it. I think we actually too just found a title for the episode. So I'm glad that you dropped that in there on this, a little shameless plug. But no, that's amazing. And that's another reason why I love to ask this question, because it's compelling. It's just like, you never really know what somebody else is doing behind closed doors or what they have out there, or kind of what's going on. We could have talked this whole podcast and never once got into that or talked about that. But then it would have debuted, or it would have been something we would have seen, and we'd be like, wow, Well, he was working on something and he was giving us everything that he had at the same time. And then not only was he working on that, but look at how detailed it is. Look at how info packed it is, but look at how resourceful and look at how helpful it is, just the same. So I'm definitely, obviously, as a podcaster, I'm excited for that. I'm excited to tap into that, to hear that. So, but no, big shout out to you. That's amazing. One, just for curating that, putting it all together, but also just for, I have to, obviously thank you and take my imaginary hat off in this case for offering that to my audience. At no cost at all, because I think that's amazing. It's something that I touched on even in one of my more recent episodes, was about real life connections and about how, I 180, 190, almost 200 episodes at this point. Maybe even by the time this episode is aired, this may even be in the 200 or the 200th, who knows, but we'll see. But just about these people who, some of them who I've never met, some of them who I may never meet, but how we can get on here, have a 30, 40, 50 hour long conversation. And at the end of the day, you truly just offer yourself up as a resource. You truly just tell people that you want to connect, that you want to talk, that you want to help, that's your life's work, your life's passion. And to me, it's just commendable, because it's not too many people out there like that. You know what I mean? And it's just like, when the sincerity, when the authenticity is there, it would be doing a disservice if you didn't capitalize it on or take advantage of it. So obviously I'm saying all of that, we're talking, but I'm really talking to my audience. I'm a big call to action person. I need my people to be taken advantage of when people, especially of your caliber, offer themselves like that. So thank you truly for that. Now, before we let everybody know where they can find you, we get into the closings and everything like that, do you feel like there's anything that we haven't touched on today that you want to leave the people with, whether it be business owners, entrepreneurs, people in relationships, people just coming across this episode in any capacity? Is there anything out there that you want them to know or that you want to leave people with?
Yes, there is. So one of the things that I go into detail about in that pop-up series that you can be doing right now is to think bigger. That most people limit themselves by what they think is realistic. But when you set a goal, you don't know it's realistic till you get into it. Find out often that what you think wasn't realistic can be realistic. So I teach that in relationship. You can approach that with business. You can approach that with parenting. Approach that in every aspect of your life. To think as big as you can and find a way to make it objectively come true.
And I touched on this already, but I really want to just kind of emphasize it again, that I love the idea that what you're talking about, while relationship magic, save your relationship, the coaching, everything that you do, while that's geared towards people in relationships, people out of relationships, people think, everything like that, you also have to think about these principles from a life perspective. And I really think that, yes, if you definitely apply them to your relationships, definitely apply them to moving forward with how you move in that regard, in that field. But think about life, like you said, parenting, in school, at work, with relationship, with friendships, with meeting with outside people, with networking, with everything. You just have to think about, always keep these things in frame of mind, and just look at the noticeable differences. Look at the change, creating change on top of that. So no, I do encourage people so much to, while you kind of hear this and while you take this, and while you may have thought at first that this was just about romantic, and you may be somebody who's single, who's not dating, anything of the sort, think about your life though. Think about when you're going to work. Think about your extracurriculars. Think about what you do outside of work. Think about what you do while you're listening to this podcast, when it's over, when you're done, when you wake up in the morning, you go to bed at night, we go through your day. I feel like there are so many places and pieces where we can apply these different resources and these things, and just look at what it can do for you, and just look at, when you authentically apply it and stay true to it, what it can really do, and how it can really be of help and of a resource to you. So,
right, because the skills work in all contexts. They work, the communication skills will work equally well in romantic relationship, in parenting, in business, with friendships, with your family, across the board.
I love it. I love it, man. I love it. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife of skills. Like, it can kind of just be, we can give it kind of anywhere at any point in the journey. I love that. Now, I'm not even going to say arguably the most important part, because I feel like the most important part has gone through the entirety of this interview, everything that you said in some capacity. But this is truly where the call to action in me comes out, where people reach out, where people tap in, where people listen to the relationship magic, where people ask certain questions, where people become inquisitive, where people want to learn, see the testimonials for themselves. For everyone out there who is coming across this episode, who is listening to it, whose curiosity has been piqued now, who they want to learn more, they want to see more, they want to follow along the journey, they want to be able to tap into relationship magic and everything that you're offering there. What are the best places to find you? What are the best places to reach you? How can people, see what you kind of have going on, see what you're going to continue to go on, sign up for the email list, everything of the sort? Just give us everything you got.
Okay, the total best place to get my help, that starting point is to go to relationshipmagic.com and then to listen to the podcast. It'll give you an amazing foundation. So that's the perfect next step.
I don't even know how to really, what other word to use or what phrase to use to really show my gratitude and appreciation. But Fred, seriously, I thank you. I thank you, like I said, for just the due diligence that you've shown even before we turned on our cameras and started talking here today. Even the reaching out to me, even listening to previous episodes, even to being a fan of the podcast. For me, like I don't think people really understand the importance of that to me when somebody tells me that they listened to an episode, whether you enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it. The fact that you click play, the fact that the podcast came across,
your episodes are great.
I appreciate that.
Listeners, they're great. In fact, it's really funny because the second I listened to was the Swiss Army knife episode.
Oh, see, you've been experimenting. I love it. I try to keep things circulating here with the podcast, but no, it really does mean the world to me when people just tap in, when people just, because I want people to come on here and not be nervous or not be afraid to really speak or be vulnerable or make themselves uncomfortable. I've had people ask me for questions beforehand or want to talk about certain things before, and I'm always fine with that. I personally don't prepare questions because I don't want to confine myself. I don't want to have a list of 1 through 10 and we get through 7 of them, but there were so many other things you said in that 7 or outside of that we could have followed up on or talked about and everything like that. So I love that we can just be explorative on the podcast and really just get into things. But I also love when people come with such just an array of just knowledge and just expertise. And like I said, I still have the email pulled up in my 50 million tabs on my Safari window about you and about the tabs and about and about your website, and just seeing what other people had to say and seeing the miracles that were worked and seeing that when you really take these and apply them and consistently apply them and meaningfully apply them, what it can really do for you. And I love that. So Fred, I really just have to thank you for the work that you're doing and the work that you're going to continue to do in the lives of everyone, in the lives of people who you know, who you don't know, my audience, even on the impact and the effect that you just had on me in this episode, and just some of the things that I'm thinking about now introspectively. I'm very appreciative for it. And I really do encourage all of my audience out there continuously to tap in, to listen to this, to replay it back, start from 000 if you need to, really to just know through and through, but Fred, I'm rooting for you. I'm encouraging you. Obviously Down to Business is in your corner through and through 110%. And anything that we can do to further show support or anything like that, please never hesitate to let us know. But to everyone else out there, I thank y'all. We've been able to move through this year. We've been able to have a live event, and it went amazing, and we had a great time. And it was just, everybody comes out and just shows love. And it's just amazing just to have that energy in the building, to be able to bless the people with giveaways and just networking opportunities, and really just see a new venue and explore the city of Charlotte just the same. So we're not stopping. The wheels must continue to go. The show must go on. And Fred was definitely a part of it today and really helped us and propelled us. So I'm grateful for him to that. So to everybody out there who continuously taps in, I thank you. I love you. This has been another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner.